Meanwhile, Ratty, warm and comfortable, dozed by his fireside. A log slipped, the fire crackled and sent up a spurt of flame, and he woke up with a start. He looked around for the mole to ask him if he knew a good rhyme for something or other. But the mole was not there. The house seemed very quiet. Then he called, "Moley," several times, and, receiving no answer, got up and went out into the hall. The mole's cap was missing from its accustomed peg. His galoshes, which always lay by the umbrella stand, were also gone. Ratty left the house and carefully examined the muddy surface of the ground outside, hoping to find the mole's tracks. There they were, sure enough. He could see the imprints of them in the mud, running along straight and purposeful, leading directly to the wild wood. Ratty looked very grave and stood in deep thought for a minute or two. Then he re-entered the house and strapped a belt around his waist and shoved a brace of pistols into it. He set off for the wild wood at a smart pace. It was already getting towards dusk when he first reached the fringe of trees and plunged in without hesitation into the wood, looking anxiously on either side for any sign of his friend. Here and there, wicked little faces popped up out of holes, but vanished immediately at the sight of the valorous animal and his pistols. He made his way manfully through the length of the wood to its furthest edge. He set himself to traverse it, laboriously working over the whole ground, and all the time calling out cheerfully. He had patiently hunted through the wood for an hour or more, when at last, to his joy, he heard a little answering cry. Guiding himself by the sound, he made his way through the gathering darkness to the foot of an old beech tree, with a hole in it, and from out of the hole came a feeble voice. Ratty crept into the hollow, and there he found the mole, exhausted and still trembling. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I've been so frightened you can't think." "Oh, I quite understand," said Ratty soothingly. "You shouldn't really have gone and done it, Mole. I did my best to keep you from it. We riverbankers, we hardly ever come here by ourselves. If we have to come, we come in couples at least, and then we're generally all right. Of course, if you were badger or otter, it would be quite another matter." The mole was greatly cheered by the sound of Ratty's careless chuckle, as well as by the sight of his gleaming pistols, and he stopped shivering and began to feel bolder and more himself again. "Now then," said Ratty presently, "we really must pull ourselves together and make a start for home while there's still a little light left. It will never do to spend the night here. It's too cold for one thing." "Dear Ratty," said the poor mole, "I'm dreadfully sorry, but I'm simply dead beat, and that's a solid fact. You must let me rest here a little while longer, and get my strength back, if I'm to get home at all." "Oh, all right," said the good-natured Ratty. "Rest away. It's pretty nearly pitch dark now anyhow, and there ought to be a bit of a moon later." So the mole got well into the dry leaves and stretched himself out, and presently dropped off to sleep, though a sort of broken and troubled sort. Ratty covered himself up too, as best he could, for warmth, and lay patiently waiting with a pistol in his paw. When at last the mole woke up, much refreshed and in his usual spirits, Ratty said, "Now then, I'll take a look outside and see if everything's quiet, and then we really must be off." He went to the entrance of their retreat and put his head out. Then the mole heard him saying quietly to himself, "Hello." "What's up, Ratty?" said the mole. "Snow is up," replied the rat briefly. "Or rather, it's down. It's snowing hard." The mole came and crouched beside him, and, looking out, he saw the wood that had been so dreadful to him in a quite changed aspect. A fine powder filled the air and caressed the cheek with a tingle in its touch, and the black holes of the trees showed up in a light that seemed to come from below. "Well, well, it can't be helped," said Ratty after pondering. "We must make a start and take our chance, I suppose. The worst of it is, I don't know exactly where we are, and now this snow makes everything look so very different." It did indeed. The mole would not have known that it was the same wood. However, they set out bravely and took the course that seemed most promising, holding on to each other and pretending with invisible cheerfulness. An hour or two later, they had lost all count of time. The snow was getting so deep that they could hardly drag their little legs through it, when suddenly the mole tripped up and fell forward on his face. "Oh, my poor shin!" "Poor old mole," said Ratty kindly. "I must have tripped over a hidden branch or a stump," said the mole miserably. "That was never done by a branch or a stump. It looks as if it was made by a sharp edge or something made of metal." After carefully tying Mole's leg up with his handkerchief, Ratty left him and was busy scraping in the snow. He scratched and shoveled and explored, all four legs working busily, while the mole waited impatiently. Suddenly, Ratty cried out, "Hooray!" "What have you found, Ratty?" asked the mole, who was still nursing his leg. "Come and see," said the delighted Ratty. In the side of what had seemed to be a snowbank stood a solid-looking little door, painted dark green. An iron bell-pull hung by the side, and below it, on a small brass plate, neatly engraved in square capital letters, they could read by the aid of the moonlight, "Mr. Badger." While Ratty attacked the door with a stick, the mole sprang up at the bell-pull, clutched it and swung there, both feet well off the ground, and from quite a long way off they could faintly hear a deep-toned bell respond. They waited patiently for what seemed a very long time. At last they heard the sound of slow, shuffling footsteps approaching the door from inside. It seemed like someone walking in carpet slippers, the mole remarked. Carpet slippers that were too large for him and down at the heel, which was intelligent of the mole because that was exactly what it was. There was the noise of a bolt shot back, and the door opened a few inches, enough to show a long snout and a pair of sleepy, blinking eyes.